Okay, I've owed this video for a couple of weeks, and sometimes life gets in the way. So, another creator, newer creator, is viewing where the United States went wrong. And he's looking at a deep dive, hi Robert, of all of the founding fathers and their ties to England. Okay. Like their military training, which makes sense because, he's retired military. And talk about a horrible way to wake up, right? You go over to the Middle East, you do things, then you come back to the United States, and then you wake up to the fact that, oh my God, I was never there for the reasons that my government told me. I've got a really good buddy that I went to high school with, Robbie, who went through the same thing. Waking up that he'd killed a bunch of innocent people in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria for him. And it's a horrible way to wake up, right? He crawled into a bottle for years, and I'm glad he's finally, crawling out of it. So that's a really tough awakening, right? I had a pretty soft awakening in 1988 watching a television commercial that said, why does the Air Force spend $10,000 on toilet seat covers when I was 14 years old? And I asked my father, why would they? And my dad, oh, that's just political speak. But, I was such a curious kid that I got the budget and started looking at money. So that's a really soft way to wake up. But I can't imagine the atrocities of war and then waking up after that the reason that you were there and that your government lied to was never why you were there. That's got to be a really tough way. Okay. So while you're breaking down the founders of our country, a really, really great thing to look at is where they stood on central banking. Okay, where we lost our country was the installation of the Federal Reserve Bank and central banking, which was sponsored by the Rothschilds, which was sponsored by, through J.P. Morgan, who was just a lapchild of the Rothschilds, and ultimately the Bank of England, right? Which did everything they could to control our currency. So even though we won the revolution, we did ultimately lose the revolution because the Bank of England installed the U.S. Federal Reserve and our current monetary supply. So if you want to know who the good guys and the bad guys were with our founding fathers, then you have to look at their stances on central banking. Okay? Because that's ultimately where we lost our country, was when the people lost control of the U.S. dollar and the currency. That's when we lost our country in 1913. Thomas Jefferson said in a writing that a central bank is more dangerous than a standing army. So I'm going to give you some quotes from the founding fathers, right? Thomas Jefferson. I wished it were possible to obtain a single amendment to our Constitution. I would be willing to depend on that alone for the reduction of the administration of our government to the principles of its Constitution. I mean, an additional article taking from the federal government the power of borrowing. Okay? Now, Thomas Jefferson said in his writings, the only thing that they missed in the Bill of Rights was an amendment to outlaw central banking. Thomas Jefferson's quote, bank paper must be suppressed and the circulating medium must be restored to the nation to whom it belongs. George Washington, paper money has had the effect in your state that it will ever have to ruin commerce, oppress the honest, and open the door to every series of fraud and injustice. John Adams, another good guy. All the perplexities, confusion, and distress in America arise not from the defects in their Constitution or Confederation, not from what of honor or virtue, as much as from the downright ignorance of the nature of coin, credit, and circulation. Okay. Now, there were good guys founding fathers that stood against central banking, which is where we ultimately lost our country. And then there were bad guy founding fathers that desperately wanted central banking. Here's a great example of a bad guy, founding father, Alexander Hamilton, right? I know he was venerated recently in a Hollywood movie, but he was very pro central banking and tying the currency back to the Bank of England. Now, back then, everybody knew the dangers of Federal Reserves and or central banking, where the government controlled the currency and not the people of that country. So much so that the sitting Vice President of the United States in Aaron Burr, who was an honorable founding father, if anybody wants to read up on Aaron Burr, had a duel with Alexander Hamilton on the cliffs of New York where he actually killed him. Aaron Burr was faster on the trigger than Alexander Hamilton, so it staved off the installation of the central bank within the United States system. Now, I know a lot of people would look through military eyes, but ultimately, money is everything. Money is power. Money is control. So, when did we lose control of our currency? Because from 1776 until 1913, the United States government itself and different states issued currency, and then a separate central banking system, was installed in 1913. And since 1913, which is a relatively recent invention, when you're looking at, 1776 to 2024, 1913 is really not that long ago. That's where the American people lost sovereign control of the currency. Now, the Federal Reserve is not a co-equal branch of government. They don't answer to anybody. Sure, they go and have meetings in Congress, but Congress can't order them to do anything. Now, the Federal Reserve Bank that's run right now by Jerome Powell, is a part of the government. How they parsed it out was all of the district banks below them, so the Federal Reserve controls the currency, gives the money to the district banks. All of the district banks are actually owned by the banking cartel, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, right? So ultimately, the banks control our currency. That's kind of the way it goes. And that's where we lost our country. So I'd encourage everybody, when you're looking at who's the good guys and who's the bad guys and who did what, just find out what their stance is on central banking. And I'm sure if you asked a current politician what their stance on central banking, you would be unilaterally horrified to find out that they're all on board with it, because it is the uniparty, and we don't really have any representatives that are representing the will of the people. I mean, I haven't seen Congress work on anything that was important to me in my 49 years of lifetime. I'm sure most of you haven't either. So if you want to know who the good guys and the bad guys are, you can just ask them straight up. Do you support central banking, yes or no? If they give you some political speak on the importance of having a central bank, then you know that they're on the take and they're part of the mafia. So I owed you this video, Robert, for a few weeks. Thanks for giving me some time to cut it. It took me a while to get after it. So I hope that helps everybody. Have an awesome day, all right?